Testing, testing, one, two, three. Testing, testing. Hooey. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for those who are watching my content. And I drop it into What a World Productions. And I was thinking about it earlier today, and I think that what I'm making is basically social commentary content. And so that's what What a World Productions focuses on. And I don't really see myself as a news source because there's people who are really way more up on this and organized than I am, and you can get that on YouTube anytime you want. And kind of like the stuff that I look at, I do sometimes watch Fox just to see what they're going to say, but since I can't stand them, I have to take them in small doses. But I have to admit, the Young Turks I've been watching a little bit for years. Chris Hedges is I read some of his books, and he's an amazing journalist who was fired by the New York Times for reporting the truth of what was happening in the Middle East. And so now remember, I made a video about how parts of New York is becoming privatized, and like LA is becoming privatized, and that's why we're building these, build to rent, cities. You're gonna build right under our feet, or should I say on top of, existing structures. And for someone like me, I'm 62. I'm going to be 63 in September the 1st coming up. I come to realize how in probably all cases, but I really can't say that because, I live, when in Rome, I live, in this society, and I use electronics, I use computers, these things cost like a lot of money for me to see 2020, which I don't think it is 2020, even though I am wearing these. I drive a car, although it's an old car. So, and also I am not ready just to live out in the woods, like off the grid, because I've been enculturated and infected in living in this world that we made, and to be on grid, and so have you. You're probably wondering, okay, what is this video going to be about? And it's going to kind of be like a personal, kind of like an admission to like what I might be becoming spiritually. And instead of going into like a little autobiography here about how I was, once not a Christian, then I became a Christian, only to not be a Christian in the traditional sense. And really just trying to come to grips with it, because and when I'm having a bad day, and I do have them, I feel like I wasted like 19 plus years of my life, being a practicing Christian. And I've destroyed a lot of art because I thought that maybe it was against, the Christian ethic. And so basically you're looking at an imperfect specimen, or maybe, to justify myself, I'm a whip, and that stands for work in progress. I did mention earlier that in another video that like as we approach older years, our guard goes down, and like your true nature seems to seep out and come out. And so I'm hoping that that's what this is, because I like what I'm thinking. I watch these videos after I make them because I got to vet out mistakes, and like I was talking about Ukraine and how we give them, these tomahawks, and we don't give them the tomahawks anymore, and Trump was yanking, Ukraine's chain. But really, those are Patriot missiles, So I make mistakes like that, and it's like, and I know some of you probably like, okay, turn off the video. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And I assure you, a lot of people think that knowledge is strictly in here. And this kind of goes into what I'm going to try to unfold. but it don't, because our brain is a part of our body, and our brain is literally an organ. And so since I have, I am older, and I'm not just an average 62-year-old guy. I'm a curious guy. I'm an arty guy. I'm kind of a nerd in a way. And I've been a stoner. I took all that. I've done all that, and never been so heavy on drinking. The last video I made a video, and it was a on the subject of trauma. And what's really cool about that is trauma, sounds a lot like soma. You'd even say they rhyme. And so kind of like an example of like where I am coming from and what I've, experienced and studied, and I'm here to talk to you about is the somatic experience, which is related to the body. And how, like, I learned to understand what Christopher Hitchens, the late journalist, said, that we don't possess bodies, we are bodies. And I study anthropology. I read books on it, and I even tried writing on about it. And I'm an unpublished writer, not an unpublished artist, but I am an unpublished writer. And it's always been interesting to me about how to really explore to the core of what reality is, because that I am in this reality. And what's really interesting is how like, as you come into consciousness. I remember I was trying to explain my experience of that to a friend. We were being driven. We were somewhere in Michigan, and then on the streets of Detroit, and we were in the back of a truck, a payload of a truck, and open to the elements. And it was dangerous. It's kind of the things that we used to do. We used to ride on, truck payloads like that, and just, and we were like, we're probably high and stuff. And I was telling my friend Tom Earhart, who really inspired me to explore strange new worlds. But he wasn't the only one. I mean, I've been, like I said, I was thinking about, this stuff, like on my own, like 9 or 10. I was thinking that how everything is connected to, like all the bad in the world is because of me. And then I later on read Siddhartha, and okay, all this stuff. And then when I understand a little bit more about certain philosophies, certain ideas, and I understand about Plato, how he's like the idealist of idealists, like the first one probably. And I want to get into that as we continue. But talking about soma, rhymes with trauma, it's a body experience. It's the experience that we have through our body. And like I was explaining to him, like, I don't know, I was painting this picture of like imagine how the experience would be for a dog that has the mind of a dog, and how if you could take that dog's brain and transform it to our brain, and how, and the time frame would be like an hour. What would the dog experience? How would it feel? Because it's definitely gonna, like, you know, um, start thinking differently. And I didn't want to change the physicality of the dog, including its organs and its eyes. Just somehow, if you can somehow get the dog's brain to become as functional, fully functional as a human brain. But I don't think I want to implant memories in that brain. It just has its own memories. And he was like, Sergio, are you trying to freak me out? We're in the back of this truck, and we're all high, and it's like, stop it. And I was like, what did I do? What I say? And well, that's the kind of hairpin that I am. And I remember around that time I was trying to understand Carl Jung's psychology, and some of them went like that. But I was reading Freud, and I started reading him, and I was reading books by Idris Shah, who wrote on Sufism, and you know, uh, DK Suzuki, I think. He was a professor over on Zen. So and meanwhile, I was trying to go for I went for my undergrad for for my bachelor's of fine art, and I eventually got it. And I really opened up my mind in those years more than I did when I was in high school and junior high school. So like, what am I doing? What am I talking about? Well, so that kind of somatic experience, using the dog as a metaphor, or and so I think that in some ways, I was a dog, and then something was put in me, and then it just started to make me see the world in a different way. And when I come to accept that, I no longer think that that I'm like the I don't know, like the total sum of what I am and what I can be, because the obvious layer of that is because there's a tomorrow, and we slip into tomorrow. But I'm thinking that, hold it, I'm thinking that, well, that probably is already in existence. I have yet just to catch up to it. And so I was thinking about how time and space, so like, we understand, I think by the turn of the century, I think that some people suspected this before Einstein, but like there's a connection between space and time, spatial temporal, I think it's called. And like he showed through his, equations, like EM equals MC squared, and that somehow space and time are part of a bigger whole. And so I come to realize that that's part of a bigger picture. So hold on one second. So I hope I can remember where I left off. So I have this idea about I was talking about space and time, but how I think that so first we thought space was a compartment that was separate from time, and they're like absolutes or separate from each other. And that even connects with that's Newtonian physics. And God, I don't know why he didn't figure it out, because he was also into like alchemy and stuff. And I don't know, I would like to do a deep dive on him, because he was like considered one of the smartest men in Europe. And so he, like what I'm about to show you, I just can't help but think that someone like him might have suspected it. And I bet if we looked at all his writings, including his stuff on magic or alchemy, so again, this is like the stuff that I like to get to know more about. So that's the kind of reading I want to do. But like, so to cut it short, so at one time, space and time were considered separate things. Now, like Einstein unified them. And so I have this little diagram I made to try to explain it. So can you see it? And I know it's really old school, and that is deliberate. I really don't want to make all these flashy, zingy videos. And I am the author of a couple of videos in Waterworld production, and I could do that stuff. And it might not be up to par to somebody who's, film major, but I get by. And so anyways, I want to make more of those videos, but why am I even talking about that? It doesn't mean anything for what we're talking about. So I'm going to get back to what we're talking about, which is this. So you see where my finger is pointed. That says space, and then see where that it's like in a compartment, but then the compartment has a wall missing, and it opens into like what looks like a corridor, and then there's time. So if you zoom out, you have something like that. And just like, I don't want to spend too much time on it. Just think about this. This is like, first we thought that space and time are separate. Then it's like, so Einstein blew out one of the walls of space and time and sort of put them like together, and they're part of a bigger whole, which looks like a corridor here. You see that it looks like a corridor here. And so the next image from that, we go to this, which is a circle, but it's really a sphere, but let's just look at it like it's this. And you can see how that's a close-up of this activity here. And then, so from that, we move to what is happening here. And so that becomes a section of a tube. And so that tube becomes a section of another, like a hoop, like a circle, it's a hoop, and then that hoop is like another tube, and that tube is another hoop, and then I go, how do I resolve this, paradox? And I go, well, maybe this really is spherical, and it just radiates outward, and so it kind of echoes the shape of that. So, like, what the heck are we talking about here? And oh, what's this? Anyways, you could imagine what stuff I have to deal with if I'm like out in public, and this is the kind of stuff that hits me while I'm out in public, or I'm at home, picking my nose. Yeah, man, pick my nose. Yeah, what are you looking at? I'm just picking my nose, man. Like you haven't. Not in public. I do that in the bathroom. I don't pick my nose in public. Well, not that I do. I'm just, I hope I can remember where I leave off, because I'm going to run off on some really weird tangents on this video probably. So bear that in mind. You can always rewind. Yeah, you can always, wait a minute. Why should I worry about it? You can rewind my video, So now, with that, let's move on. The question remains, like, why is that there? Now, because of gods, and I think that it's an invention of mankind. We invented the idea or the concept of gods. And like Joseph Campbell taught me a lesson. He said that God is not the source. God is a vehicle that tries to point to the source, because it's a metaphor for inexplainable and inexplainable type of relation we have with what's real, what's really real, the underlying factor. And then what the problem with that is, if we're thinking about it in space and time, we don't have access to the eternal, the infinite, or the divine. So we're stuck with things that refer to that. And so we are talking about the things that refer to that. And then that has to, like, refer to the things that are, like, we're talking about. Like, so it's like a reflection of reality, and that reality is just a reflection of an ultimate reality, or something like that. I'm kind of stringing on what he said and what I think, because it ties in better with my little diagram there. And when we say gods, that's the best way I can explain it. And then like the first reference that would be, you have the classical reference, which are multiple gods in like Greek mythology, which I don't want to go over the names, and then Roman, there's a lot of Middle Eastern gods. Basically, Allah and also Yahweh were local gods of the Middle East, among other gods. And India, they have thousands of gods. They have a lot of gods. And so when like the Muslims went over there, they're like, okay, we'll take that and we'll put that over here with these other gods. And when the Christians went over there, they're like, we'll take that and put that over here with the other gods. It's like, there, and I, when I was in undergrad school, I was like really interested in these things called gods. Later on I became a Christian, but like, like Joseph Campbell defines them as being like manifestations of the confliction of the different organs. How our organs are they all have their own energy, and these all conflict inside of us, and so we're trying to resolve all that with our abstract ways of thinking. And I can take that further, how like it's this also this conflict with our with our environment, But he'd say, yeah, but that's how it's registered and perceived by our organs. And touche, you're the professor, and so you know that's why I like him, Joseph Campbell, good guy to read. At least, and here's the thing: it's kind of like a test. When you read Joseph Campbell, you come back to me, I don't like it, like that Ren and Stimpy horse. I don't like. I read it and I don't like it. And I'd say, we probably can't really have a really decent, meaty conversation. I'll probably have to put myself onto your level, and it's kind of like, yeah, but he talks about that. Yeah, but he talks, especially with Christians. Yeah, Joseph Campbell's been all over that, and so it's like, man, I'm tethered with this confinement. Like, I think you can see based on my diagram about what I was thinking as like that's what reality really is. But in reality, based on what I just said, you probably understand that I'm thinking that's more like a reflection or a metaphor for what reality really is. We can never really know something in itself, like Immanuel Kant said. And so I came to grips with all of that, and I might not have known what I was doing when I was a lot younger. And so I always feel like one foot's in the one of like, okay, God's, the divine, and then the other foot is in the one where it's all from the bottom up, kind of like development of life, where it was abiogenesis, which there's it's devoid of life to biogenesis, and atheist, get it, devoid of theist, like, or gods. And so abiogenesis is very similar. So biogenesis, where you have like matter reproducing itself, and then those cells that reproduce themselves, they combine to create like cities, and those things combine to create worlds. And guess what? You are a world with a whole bunch of cities, and that's kind of how I like to look at things. And like, so when you're on that side of the fence, it's like, yeah, it all happened on its own, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And so what I try to do is say, yeah, I have to accept that. Yet at the same time, I feel like there's always something missing when I just think about it that way. So then I go over to this side of the fence, and now you're talking about the divine. So like the divine that I'm getting to really be more interested in is the one that somehow is where it looks at nature, and nature is a reflection of the ultimate divine. And so nature is like the closest thing to the divine that you can get. And when we tamper with it, like our man-made cities and our concepts, that's a description of nature, which is like a description or, abstraction of the divine. You see where I'm going with this? And it kind of ties in with like this bit, and that's like another hoop. It's like, all that's, so it's like hoop within a hoop, within a hoop, within a hoop. And what's interesting about that is Black Elk had this vision when he was at Harney Peak, and it was like this epiphany, this vision. He was, that guy was a real mystic, and so he saw these, hoops, and I think they're like hoop within a hoop. And so didn't I, without thinking about that until now, describe that phenomenon? And so, or a concept exploding between my ears. Yes, I did. And so, where was I going with that? Okay, Black Elk. Okay, hoops within a hoop. Yeah, because that's what that is. And so, the whole idea of gods for me now has become this description of functions that happen, but we can never have access to it directly. Just like we only know what happened on this side of the Big Bang, the singularity that happened like 13 point something billion years ago. Maybe it's a little bit more. And like, so that's what that is regarding, like, the first cause, because gods are about the first cause in the I guess a literal sense. Otherwise, why would we deal with these gods? But then when you look at the multiple gods, it's like they are like custodians of certain functions that Joseph Campbell said represent the different energies emanating from the different organs and parts of organs that altogether clash. that come from our bodies in our bodies. But I just not satisfied with that, and so it's already like 25 minutes in this video, and so like basically, I think more like a Gnostic would, and so I'm like saying that I might be becoming a neo-Gnostic, and I don't know what that means in terms of how I'm supposed to live my life, but I know what it means by definition. So by definition, like if you take a journey down memory lane to learn what Gnosticism is, and it's mentioned in the New Testament. It pretty much describes, and I know that there's a whole hierarchy of all these, they're called eons, but I don't remember. I'm off the top of my head. I know like a couple of things, and that's what I'm going to share with you. So classic Gnosticism believes that everything emanates from something that in the common vernacular is the monad. And Plato would call this the all good. And that's why I got interested in this. And in the allegory of the cave, Plato's cave, what that is sort of like what we're going to talk about here, where picture these people in a cave where they're strapped down and they're forced to look in only one direction, like the mono direction of time. I just put that in there. Hope you liked it. I knew you would. And there's these shadows, and these shadows are being put there and made there by these hidden, individuals, and you only see the shadow dance. And so to you, you think that is reality. And then like one of these people like broke out of that, and he scurried on out of the cave. And it must have been some really weird, kind of elaborate type of design. Something that's such a maze that it's almost as difficult to get out of that as it would be difficult for you to get out of what you think you are and what the society from even when you're like okay, when you were in mom's womb, you were already being programmed for living in this cave, and the reality is the shadows and not the real reality. And also your body is probably made of the same shit that that's what your body is, the thing that's making the shadow dance for you. So you're doing it to yourself. And so, but this guy, one of these people, breaks out of the prison, and he somehow finds his way out to the surface, because this is like a cave, right? So stick to that image. And he gets out and he sees a real light of day. He sees true light, not this dim light, but the true shining light. You have the sun, you have the environment, the landscape, cliffs, water, oceans, trees, and other living things. And it's like, holy shit, And so then he comes back down, and he tries to explain to everybody there, and they're like, we don't understand, well, I can't really show you because it's beyond comprehension. You can't. I can't describe to you the taste of pasta fazool. You have to go there and taste it. So it's kind of like that. Think about it. The experience of it is not the same as getting an abstract representation of it. Although everything is an abstract representation of something that's higher. Based on a little thing that I made, and so, and I don't think Plato was talking about that. So I'm sorry about that. So what happens was there was this realization that the people that were living in that with these shadows, they realized that they were like making games of like living in there. Like, yeah, we'll make up little reward, kind of systems. Like you do these for a reward, you do this for a reward, you do everything like for a reward, which is kind of like how this dimension works. If you don't work, you don't eat. And if you're an animal and you don't scurry and get to your, what you need to do to eat and to live, the reward, the reward is in the effect that what you get after you make some kind of a decision and you act on that. For people and for animals, they just, they do it and then they get the reward. So even before we evolved into from animals to people, well, we are animals, from non-hominids to hominids to us. I think that even before that, we were being schooled into believing what the contents of the Plato's cave is, and he didn't think about that. I did, but I'm just putting it. And so it's like trying to explain it to these people. They were like, "No, you're a lunatic," and so they wind up killing him. So it turns out that Plato's Republic and Plato himself, he existed like a few hundred years before Christianity. And again, this is not like you have to get the exact number of years, right? I don't know that off the top of my head, but it's a few hundred years, And so, because I have to say a lot in a small amount of time, so he, you know, uh, existed long before Christianity, and so this guy, who Plato was talking about, happened to be Socrates. Now, the reason why okay, do you know? Okay, he loved Socrates, and so there must be like a double kind of message that he was trying to convey. Uh, but the singular message that I'm trying to bring out in the Plato's Cave is that this guy was the guy who in the allegory broke out and he saw the truth, and so they killed him. Sounds like Jesus, doesn't it? Like Jesus is the way, the light, and the truth. And so remember the tube in there. So it turns out that Gnostics, and the thing is, Gnosticism means like hidden knowledge. And so the thing is, Plato is a part of a bigger whole. Like, and so when you look at Gnosticism per se, it it adds to the tapestry of what you get from the concept by Plato. And so, like Plato, he believed that there's a perfect world, and we are a reflection or a shadow of the perfect world. That's basically what he means. And so, and that's why for the Gnostic, first cause, I use his monad. And so this monad is without character, without preference, without any kind of texture, without anything related to anything that is known as the category of thoughts. And so you can't even, so the Hindus believe that like that's how to their god Brahma, Brahman or Brahma, uh, uh, is like no tongue has spoiled it. Like in Sanskrit, they say no tongue has spoiled the name of this god, which is interesting because the ancient Hebrews, like some of the stuff is really cool. They had a name for God, which is Tetragrammaton, which was not really the name of God, but like the God itself, you can't name because probably. And the cool thing is like these ideas. That's why I'm interested in gods in this. It's like, can you imagine if God, you spoke the real word of God, and then all of a sudden your mouth catches on fire, and then you like totally like spontaneously combust. That'd be a pretty interesting picture, right? And you take acid and you're on fire. Ever listen to teenagers being interviewed about their experience of taking acid for the first time? I remember one kid said that he realized that everything was God. And so Hindus understood this, and a lot of, I think, mystics understood this. And Terence McKenna talks about this. He has this theory, the stone ape theory, where like our more primate ancestors, they started eating like hallucinogens like mushrooms, and that kicked our evolution to the criminal's path that led to us. And I understand that. I understand that also that when there was a time when we were like herbivores, and sometimes we eat raw meat, but that's not the same as when you cook the meat. After we domesticated fire, we started cooking food, and probably not just meat, but meat was included. Meat was a necessary ingredient. You somehow create this chemical reaction in the meat when the temperature rises to like a higher degree, where okay, the germs are gone and it makes it sick, but also something happens in the chemistry that it releases a lot more energy, so that when you consume it, your body is able to extract more energy. Now, I read this in an article. So people who know about how our alimentary, tract works, And they, well, no, you're wrong. I mean, I'm sorry. I read this in a real anthropology article, and it was like, years ago, like 8, 10 years ago. So I can't. I should find the source. But you see, I'm not like the devil in the details. I'm not trying to prove everything that I'm saying. I'm just kind of like on a, I'm going with the flow, and I don't want to bottle myself in that kind of like quagmire. Um, and so, but I try my best to attach what I'm thinking to like a source. And when I do AI, dialogue with the ChatGPT, I sometimes mention the source that it's gleaning its opinions or observations from. And so I understand that. I got two masters. I have a master's degree, and so like defend your argument. I understand all that, and not to say I'm the best at it, but I understand how to do that. So like for this, boy, I think I kind of forgot my train of thought, but I know that I'm talking about Gnosticism and the cosmology of it. And so the idea is you have monad. And so this, like I said, this guy, there's nothing. This is just like the God of gods. This is not even remotely connected to any kind of idea of gods. But somehow from the monad you have the pleroma, which is a realm in itself. Probably this is okay. Number one, if like I'm not like a scholar, a Gnostic scholar, but the basic idea, the basic gist, I do accept it. I do like it. The pleroma might be the space in which this monad exists, which means that there's something greater than monad, or it's just one and the same thing. And so I don't know, or it's just the pleroma is the. I think the pleroma is like the purgatory between the monad and everything that he creates. But he doesn't create it; it just happens. Like is the sun creating the UV light and the light that we have, or is it just doing it just because it is the sun? So the sun's being the sun, and we're getting the benefits from the light of the sun, the radiation and all that too. That's how the monad works. What's fascinating about that is how the sun ties in with religiosity, and like so, like that's why you have like sun worship, and it makes total sense. And I think, anyways, I don't want to get into. Oh man, I can see myself going to all these different kinds of directions, and I'm not going to do it. So anyways, that's the nature of the monad. Probably like it's like the sun. And so it does. It's like so, and there's things that happen from the sun that it can give you skin cancer, and so that's a bad thing. So that means that the sun is evil because it creates damage. It damaged something. You got skin cancer, and the sun it also damages other things. Now because of the sun, we have our weather. That's where we get our heat from, and so you get like the cold and warm currents clashing, and then you get a hurricane, and so you kill things. And so wow, that means the sun is evil. No, the funny thing is, just like the sun is not immoral, it's amoral, like abiogenesis versus biogenesis, and atheist versus theist. It's devoid of any preferences to act in any kind of way, and so you're going to have things that benefit from the sun, and things that are going to receive something of the contrary. So but I think that's a good way, and this is kind of why I went down this path. It's like, wow, that kind of like, exonerates the monad from any kind of wrongdoing. But from it, a lot of weird stuff happens that's like considered classical wrongdoing. And so what happens is from that you have the pleroma, and so the pleroma is the stuff that is now you could use that to create things. And so now from the pleroma, that stuff oozes into like these angels. So you could use conventional religious wisdom, like in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, you have God and you have angels, and you could use that for the Gnostic cosmology of like God, which is a monad, which it really isn't God, and you'll understand why. But you have like for an immediate references, like you have the monad, and then you have like the angels, but it's not angels. They're called I think they're called aeons, Aeon, aeon. And I think one of the characteristics of these things, because they're going from the general to the specific at this point. So what the specific thing is, you have like two opposites, and they have to unite to create something that is more like on the level of what the monad can create, like maybe create more pleroma. Again, that part of my Gnostic knowledge might be very unorthodox, but I like it, and I might stick to it. And I'm going to read more on Gnosticism. Anyways, so it's like a male and a female. The opposites. And creates. So now one of these, or an offshoot of this, was named Sophia, and it turns out that she's like one of the first eons. And so what happens is, and I'm going to get some of this wrong, but who cares? What happens is she wants to be like the monad, and so what she does is, and she wants to do it alone without a partner. So what she does is she goes somewhere in secret and she creates a being, because she wanted to reflect what monad did, creating them. So she might have done it out of love, but she was also deceptive about it too. And so she hides it. And so this thing that is created, you have like the darkness, like in the Old Testament, there's all the darkness, and then you have the spirit hovering over it, which is Yahweh. And she created that thing, and that thing is called, the classic name for that is called Yaldabaoth. And so this thing is now going to create the world that you see, that you are in, and it's described like in the Old Testament. And then that's what this world is. It's a classic Gnosticism, at least bits and pieces of it. And so she realized that, oh, this thing is insane, because maybe she can see outside of time, and she's like, holy shit, I really fucked up. Then she kind of conceals it in darkness. That's why the Gnostics, like, this world is darkness. You get it? Now the thing is about that Yaldabaoth, her son, or whatever you want to call it, it thinks that it is the monad, it is the creator of all these things. Now, what is that? Who fits that description in classic theology? Lucifer, the devil. The devil wanted to sit on the throne, God's throne. Meaning, if he wants to sit on God's throne, that makes him the king. And so if he's the king, he's like, I'm the king, I'm the king. Well, what happens to God, So he is, I'm God. And so that's what this Yaldabaoth, is doing. Same thing. And so that's why you have the story of Genesis, because in the book of Genesis, like in the Pentateuch, the Old Testament, you have the story of how a spirit lies to the first man and the first woman and tricks them to eat the forbidden fruit and all that stuff. And instead of getting into that, like, tree of good and evil and the everlasting life, that could be a separate freaking like video. And so, but like, so to make the story short, that is the scapegoat. And so then God, curses him. He curses the snake, curses the man, curses the woman, and kicks him out of the garden. And somehow the snake escapes. And so in the latter books, like into the New Testament, it's like Lucifer, or Satan, is like in charge of this world. And so that's why there's evil spirits, there's demon possession, and that's why there's all so God cursed, God said, well, you've cursed, I curse you now. And so that means the whole world is cursed. So like that's why now, like, and so supposedly people live to be like close to 1,000. Now we live to be less than 100. And so all these things fall, that's the falling from grace kind of a thing. And what's interesting about all that is it ties in with the idea about the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and then like the Iron Age, and then like the combination of that and clay, and You have a lot of stuff like that. You also have the idea that this is a lie, and so in Sanskrit, like in Hinduism, they call that Maya. This is an illusion. An ignorant poet talked about a dream within a dream. And so instead of getting really, I don't want to get too stuck in the details, but there's a god in the Indian cosmology called Vishnu, and this god is sleeping, and from the god emanates the universe, or emanates a world, or something grand, and then from that pops out Brahman, and then Brahman is the creator of another world, and then in that world, is us. And so it's like a dream. It's all from a dream that Vishnu was having. And so it all just ties in. And so then you go back to Plato, and Plato is believing that everything is really, it's not physical, it's a manifestation of something else. And so idealism comes from that and says, like with Arthur Schopenhauer, that the world is as idea. He wrote a book called The World as Idea. And that means that everything really is like a giant thought. And it ties in with the Eastern schools, and it ties in with drug imbibing shamans, and, ties in with people who believe in magic, Aleister Crowley, and LaVey. Anton LaVey, they believe that this realm is not physical; it's really spiritual or field. And like Crowley even said that it all obeys some kind of a math, an invisible kind of geometric math, and that all ties in. Yeah, and who did the math? It'd be the Yaldabaoth, who stole it from the pleroma, emanated by and from the monad, the all good. You see how this all falls into place. And so in the Old Testament, the story that we're supposed to accept is that it's that snake that did it. So the snake gets all the rap, the bad rap. They pass the buck on to the snake. And so first you have the buck passing, like Eve, God comes, he's walking in the noon of the day, who ate the fruit, and then like Adam says, it was her. She got me to do it. And then God asks her, and she's like, the snake did it. The snake got me to do it. And so that's why you have like Lucifer as the light bearer, right there, right? Okay. 48 minutes into this, I think we're good. So with this light bearer, he takes on all of the, he takes the blame. And what's interesting, now I'll give you a little story about Christianity, how it works. So the first Adam sinned. Who's the second Adam? It would be Jesus. So Jesus is now on the scene, thousands of years later, and he's like, I have to take that curse on me, and so then, I bear the burden. And so he becomes what's called the scapegoat. What's interesting about that is the goat metaphor. And so now you look at Baphomet, and it's a goat. But then it has like the opposites, male and female, like all that stuff. And the upside down pentagram. Oh, okay. And so here's the thing. You know how like if you tell a joke, there's a little bit of truth in that joke? I really think that somehow the Bible belies the real truth. Now, a Christian would think, yes, yeah, you're going to be a Christian again. That's good. I'm thinking, no, you should become a Gnostic. And that's my defense against like Orthodox Christianity, because it's like, no, you guys got it's all inverted. And so now hold on to that. So that's why this snake, this is devil, it takes all the blame. So basically what you have is a God that had not done its shadow work that created the world. And so it does not accept its feminine nature. The day doesn't accept the existence of the night, because good cannot, fellowship with darkness. And that's why when I was going to church, my pastor would, show that yin and yang symbol and say that, you see how you have like that one S-type thing looks like a polywog, and the other end of the polywog is black, and you have black and white polywog, and then you have like these eyes, and each eye is like the other shade. So like the white is going to be white with the black shade in its eye, and then the black fish is, and that they're like fish, you know. So the black fish is like with a white eye, and so he says you can't see. That's why that's evil, because you're just trying to say that there's good in darkness, and there's also evil in light. And I'm like, how could this guy be like that, or be that silly or stupid? Because when you read in the Bible, and I'm gonna, well, I'll use AI for that. Um, Hey, in the Bible, where does it say that God says in the Old Testament that He created evil? Isaiah 45:7. Open your Bible. I form the light and create the darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. I think it's a Freudian slip. And also, that's the white fish with the black eye in the yin and yang symbol. So, and that's another thing. The reason why I think that if you're like ultra like West and you're a Christian, man, you gotta like put that stuff down and study Zen and the literature of Zen and Buddhism and Hinduism. And so it's a whole different reality of how to look at things. And it's very liberating, you know. Doesn't mean it solves all your problems. You're not gonna get cancer when you get older, you're gonna be fired, you're gonna lose your job, or you're homeless, you get divorced. No, it's not all it's about just, you know, what it's about. It is what it is. Like, you know, what's the meaning of a flea? It just is. And some people are going to get it, like us, and others won't. And hey, it doesn't matter. They're not going to go to hell, like, and suffer for eternity. So now I'm glad I mentioned that, because it goes into what I really want to talk about. Because I don't want this to be too long. I could make it that long, but I don't want. So, that's, that's the thing. And so I think the Bible, it kind of makes these Freudian slips. And so with the God of the Bible, it's like a Carl Jung patient who hasn't integrated his shadow. And so it when you don't integrate, you don't accept that you are, like you have your own devil. You don't accept that a part of you is evil. Um, like you or you don't accept the part of you that acts like that. Like, accept the fact that you're a bigot, and that you want to like steal from that guy, or whatever. Like, so the idea is that you're supposed to acknowledge that those energies exist in you. You're supposed to integrate that into yourself, so that it is exposed to the daylight, and so and then it could then evaporate. And as it evaporates, it creates a type of incense that when you smell it, and then you are illuminated, and then you are like, on a higher conscious level, because you've integrated the things that are deep within, and the things that are like what you just want people to see. And Freud talks about that. He talks about the ego, and he talks about how that's like, this is all that exists. It's like, that's what Yaldabaoth is. He's an example of the ego. I created all this. It's like, no, you're in the middle of it, experiencing it, and you have a mommy, Sophia. So she was like, holy shit, did I fuck up? So she hid it and put it in the darkness, and so that's why this world is really darkness. And that's why she is, now check this out. She's mentioned in the Old Testament. Where is Sophia mentioned in the Old Testament? Where is wisdom mentioned in the Old Testament? Come on, having fun. Hey, you can do this too. Chokmah is a Hebrew word. Hokmah, it's actually pronounced Hokmah. The C is silent. Hokmah, and that means wisdom. And so the thing is, this wisdom is like the co-creator. So Sophia, who was the actual creator of the creator of this world, which is really the true hell, the darkness, she's relegated to a co-creator, because that's the ego does. You know, So anyway, anywho, this world is hell. Now, how does that work? Let's look at the description of hell. And so I don't want to like make this into a Bible study, but like in the New Testament, and there's other examples of what the Bible might be, you know, like the burning garbage heaps in the Harlem of Jerusalem. You know, it's like, it smells. Okay, I get all that. That's just an example of metaphors for how it is an undesirable place. But one of the descriptions is that in the New Testament, described there, is that it is dark, and the only thing you could hear is people's shattering or chattering or gnashing of teeth and their screams of agony, but you can't touch them in your utter darkness. That goes on forever. Not a fun place to be. Not a fan. Okay, and so guess what? That's a description of this world. Now, how is that possible? Well, this world is, lit up by the sun. It's made of, matter, and Christopher Hitchens, we don't possess bodies, we are bodies. Really, it's just a low vibration, but like so. We can touch each other, we can hug each other, we can procreate. But if like you have to have an experience to tell you that I had an epiphany that I experienced that all life is one from the beginning of life into the end of life, and that can include all the planets of all the galaxies, all the universes that have life in it. Like, what is life? And so the first form of religion or spirituality that happened on this planet was something called animism, and they believed that everything was alive. So you have that, and so it all connects. It's fascinating. It's a real cool rabbit trail. And so all life is one. But I'm separate from you. And even when we touch each other, we wind up fighting anyways, because we're not really one. We're apart. The ego says, I am me, and this is mine, and that is you, and that is yours. So that's why that's a metaphor for being in utter darkness, and you're hearing other people, but you can't really touch them. You think you are, but you're not. And the Buddha says all life is suffering. So I mean, this is so I am very eclectic. So this world is a world of suffering. So how is that possible? Well, you look at a pond and you're going to have all these different things living in the pond, and they're all eating each other, and you're eating them. This is happening all over the place. You also have disasters like natural forest fires, hurricanes. You have us killing each other, like what's going on in Gaza. And so God per se doesn't seem to care. Now the reason why is I would say is a Neo-gnostic is because the monad is amoral. And the monad's like the sun. So you're gonna blame the sun for the forest fire, but then what about the conditions favorable for plants to create photosynthesis to live, and then from the plants you get the insects and the we all came from this like first you have the water, and then you have the land, and then you have like the green like activity of photo to create the atmosphere. It had to be a type of thing like that. You have gases, and then you have like the photosynthesis of these proto plants that we have, and it's like so that's because of the sun. Without the sun, we can have life, because all the energy we talked about entropy in a previous video, that energy comes from the sun, and from that we get all of this. So but at the same time, because of the sun, you can have damage. And so how about the same time with life eating itself, you can have damage, but then you also have new life. From death comes life. Without death, you don't have life. That's the yin and yang thing again. So the dark side of Gnosticism is, we don't like that, and so we want to get the hell out of that. But then, is it so dark if that's what the Buddhists are doing? Because they believe that if you are not going to do the work to experience what's called nirvana, you're gonna be reincarnated, and you're gonna be doing this again for all of eternity. So this has been going on forever, and so that's why. Now I'll cut to like the Gnosticism. So when you die in traditional Christianity, if you don't accept Jesus, you go to hell, and you suffer for eternity. In my version of Christianity, which is a Gnostic Christianity, it would be like, well, no. When you die, you're gonna come back to this, just like what the Buddhists think, and the Hindus and all that. So somebody by the name of Jesus said, "I can get you out of this." So and so you practice what he says, and you somehow return back to the divine, which is a monad. This goes to Beethoven, who said there's a quote of him saying how his music, he hopes that it helps people get out of the, the struggle and the suffering of life through his music, because the music can bring them to the divine. And so this brings, that's why I can go into bifurcate in many different directions. So the traditional idea of art, and it goes to the Greeks, they believe that there's like this kind of like a muse touches the artist. The divine touches the artist and able to create. That's what inspiration is. Now the Orthodox Christians say, yeah, that's evil because you're being possessed by a spirit. Man, Christianity, if you're an artist, you are fucked if you're a born again Christian. I don't care what you say, because basically your music sucks. It totally sucks. Especially American Christian music. At least that when you look at listen to like classical music like Bach or even Beethoven, it's like they have a sense of something that you can never understand. And you got to go back to that. But you don't know diddly squat. If you're an American born again Christian, I don't care if you're. The only way you can beat me in a discussion or debate on this is because you have a higher IQ, and you're just, you're a better chess player than I. That doesn't prove shit, you know. So I don't care. I already, I made up my mind. I already know. I've been through this walk for 60. I made like 62 trips around the sun. And so many Christians don't even believe in that. And like some of you believe the Earth is flat. So the Earth, the sun goes around the Earth or whatever. Like it's like a disc, and the sun's going like this around that. It's just so ridiculous. Anyways, but the thing, so I've done this where I say I try to make these flat earthers, you know, feel a little better. I say, yeah, you got the idea about the Earth being flat wrong. It's actually the universe. And so the idea about that is this is a giant hologram. It ties in with Plato, doesn't it? It ties in with Plato, because this is the shadow play, you know, and we're the ones doing it. We're actually doing this to ourselves. And so, like Immanuel Kant talks about how things cannot be experienced. The things themselves you cannot be experienced because you're immersed in this body that's also space and time. So you're stuck seeing like a shadow of reality. And so unless you have taken like copious amounts of hallucinogens or entheogens or whatever, or you meditate, you do the work, and you can achieve this by fasting for 7 days. You'll get this. That's why 7 days. That's why 7 is a powerful number, because if you fast, well, actually, chances are like you'd have to fast for like 40 days and 40 nights. If you fast for 40 days and 40 nights, you probably would have the kind of experience that the Buddhists and the Zen people have, the mystics and all that. And people shortcut that by taking mushrooms and LSD and stuff like that. Which brings me to this guy. I did mention that I'm an artist, a visual artist. I've been doing this all my life. And so here is it's a drawing, pen and ink, on a hanger. This is called a caped hanger. That's what I go by. Okay. And so the subject is important to me. I decided to take scenes from the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Terry Gilliam of Monty Python, and just do these drawings. And so like this is the numbers there correspond to the movie, how far I am into the movie, and I have these little quotes. Have we have we deteriorated to the level of dumb beasts? Now, what's really interesting about this is that what I'm talking about ties in with this guy. This guy is Hunter S. Thompson. And put this over here. Okay, so I'm afraid of, cut my head off. This is the top, so I gotta here. Let me do this. I made some videos where half my head was cut. So and actually it's because boom 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 ba 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 ma ma. I got a belly. Ba 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 boom ma ma ba ma ma ba 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 ma ma ma. All right, but really I don't want to So okay, I gotta watch out. I don't want to lose my track of thought. So this world, okay, the way the Gnostics see it, and how Jesus is like, hey, I'll show you how to get out of here. And so it turns out that the first Christians, I think, were Gnostic. And so the establishment, the man, got authenticated because, or I have to play with the word authenticated, insultated because Jesus is saying that they worship the devil. And so they had to kill him. And they got the Romans to, somehow help, Pontius Pilate and all that, It's a very interesting read, it's, and God, it's anyways. So, there's a lot of weird theories about how Paul actually is responsible for this type of Christianity that has become the prevalent one for the world. And that somehow he sort of contaminated the whole thing because he somehow was in cahoots with the Roman government. I don't want. I know all sorts of weird crap. I don't want to get into that right now. But let's just suffice it to say that Jesus was saying that and you listen to how he cuts into these people because he's pretty much saying you guys worship Satan. You guys. And then you understand though, if you read in the Bible, then he actually has a convo with Lucifer. Worship me, I'll give you all the kingdoms. Man does not live by bread alone, but the word of God. You gotta understand that I think that there's bits and pieces of gold nuggets in this text or the Bible, but then there's a lot of propaganda, a lot of bullshit. And so one of the examples of bullshit is when you read I think it's in Revelation, how it gives Gnosticism a bad name. And it's very similar to how the Bible gives the devil a bad name. Bear that in mind. And so it creates this lie that, okay, that thing did it. And so now we can get into Satanists. So the Satanists are like, no, we worship that. Because, tongue-in-cheek wise, we're actually worshiping the real Jesus. And we're worshiping the opposite of what you say, which is what magic does. And Lisa Crowley talks about this. That if you say in this world to go up, we're going to go down. And if you say in this world that as white as the driven snow, your spirit is pure white, we're going to get into the darkness of black. Now based on what I just told you, doesn't that make sense? And I hope that some Satanists get in and say, yeah, you're actually right about that. I hope so. I'm more of a Gnostic than a Satanist, in terms of my philosophy. Because I'm not going to go on my knees and pray to a Gnostic book, I don't know how to do that anyways. So, and with the theory of evolution, it ties in with this because of the idea. I might have mentioned this in a previous video that we stand on a mountain of dead things, and we are comprised of dead things. Everything that you are is from a dead thing. Where do the molecules come from? Originally it came from something that happened 13 point something billion years ago, which would probably be when you have the the spirit of this God hovering over the deep, and he created this, but that God is actually Yaldabaoth, you know, just an aeon who thinks that it's the monad, the monad. So that you have the dyads, which is like the neons are the dyad. So you have the monad and a dyad, and so that's like below that, and it thinks that it's numero uno. So you see how this connects, and so that's why I'm like, hey, maybe I'm kind of like a neo-gnostic new. And unfortunately, it sounds so much like neo-Nazi. But the thing I assure you, like Gnosticism starts with the letter G, not with N. So, don't be too alarmed. So that's like, so now when you look at that, and then you look at Orthodox religion, and including Israel, and you look at the what looks like human sacrifices that they're performing. They're killing all these Palestinians and stuff like that. And so if their God is really the demonic force, and like Jesus is saying, you got to get the fuck out of here to go to the true source, which is the monad, then the opposite of what they say is true. So what they're doing is, in this inverted sense, the transgression. So you got to transgress to get God's blessing when you're living in this, this world. You're a part of this thing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm calling myself a Gnostic these days, is because that's why people like Trump, they have everything, and like Van Gogh, he died. Look how Van Gogh died. Now, again, you could probably disprove what I'm saying by giving me other counter examples, but like I said, I'm not trying to, prove this. I'm telling you that, I like cats. You're going to try to tell me that, how dare you like cats? I'm going to show you that you are wrong. It's a fallacy to like cats. I don't even like all cats. My mom had a cat. I didn't like it. It was mean. It was one of those orange tabbies. Those are nasty cats. And this was fat too, like a bulbous kind of, it scared me. It scratched me feet. Anyways, so hey, I'm just expressing, and so that's the best we can really do, is express. And so I remember when I was in grad school, I came with this epiphany, because before I became a Christian, I was more like on the criminal's path to like a personal sense of enlightenment. So what we are doing is we're expressing ourselves, right? That's what we are good at, expressing ourselves. And so ultimately, the highest form of that is like, it's a form of expression of asking what it is to be alive. And then I got into Campbell. I was like, yeah, that's totally what I was trying to say. And so art is the like, one of the things that art can do is give you this sense of what it is to be alive. But it's really an expression of asking the question. And then I was like, well, maybe that's where science and art meets, and religion. And so that's why I'm into this. And so I almost forgot about Hunter S. Thompson. So Hunter S. Thompson was, I'm not going to give you the biography of this guy. I'll just kind of give you bits and pieces. So he was a journalist who got into LSD and other hallucinogens, and he wrote this book for Rolling Stone, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that I'm getting my inspiration from to make these hanger pieces. And so the metaphor is, he's going to Las Vegas with his friend, this lawyer, and they're looking for the American dream. And so then he can like expand on that. Remember, he was on a bunch of drugs, including LSD. And so that, to me, I couldn't help but think, wow, that's kind of like he is going into this vortex, and it concentrates in Las Vegas. And in a sense, Las Vegas is a metaphor for the Plato's cave. And he goes in there, and he's and he's going to get out by taking his hallucinogens. So there's like a weird Gnostic kind of a thing. And the problem with that is I tend to do that with everything. And so I'm beginning to see that in everything, and it could be a problem. But with him, it's kind of like it's definitely a journey. It's definitely an adventure, and he shows you the underbelly of American culture, and he called it the Fifth Reich or something like that. And he's on his LSD and that, and he starts seeing everybody become lizards. And if you get into like what's his name, David Icke, he says that really that's what this all is. It's run by these lizards, and these lizards, And I've heard a friend call somebody reptilian. Oh, she looks like she's reptilian. So in some schools of thought, we are the reptiles, and we don't even know it, because we have this, you know, um, like this visor on that makes us think that we're beautiful. But I don't. But like with the LSD, but the thing is, maybe the lizards are beautiful and we're ugly, because they're not the ones destroying everything. We are. So there. So, and the thing about the lizards is like that's like an example of the source of life because it's cold blooded, and it's amoral, and so but that's the source of all life, and so earlier traditions in religion they have the snake as a good symbol, and it's the bringer of wisdom, and the snake can it sheds its skin like the moon does its shadow, and also the snake is a symbol of the force of life itself. And so it's eternal. And the skin that it sheds is you and me, and eras and worlds. This thing is, and if you take LSD or mushrooms, you're riding on that. You're like pushing through all these dimensions, and you realize, whoa, you're although you're supposed to be a scale and you just drop off, you remain intact. So intact, and that's what the mystics talk about, and that's what these people do all these hallucinogens talk about, and the Buddhists and that they realize that they're alive, but they're experiencing death. Everything is dying, but you're still alive, witnessing it, because ultimately we are eternal, and this is gonna be dropped off. So the whole born again thing means that you're aware of it, and so now you follow Jesus, which is the way, and so He is the way, and so the true light has nothing to do with visible light, and so that this visible light winds up becoming the dark. That's what that is. I wonder how far I can go with this. I don't know if I don't know. I just kind of want to focus on, and you can see this in reality, and then when you realize you start interacting with people, you're like, the way society works is it forces you to put on some kind of mask, and so it's like a suit, and it's your body, your flesh. That's a suit. And I used the term fleshy wallet, like years ago. I was like, it's a fleshy wallet, and it's just like this, it's like a pair of clothes, a pair of pants and a shirt, and so that's what this is. But then you take it all away, nothing is left, because it's really hard. It's like the duality of like subatomic material, which is like it's both a wave and a particle, which is like door to this other reality. That's when you realize that things become like this, unpredictable, and what's solid becomes, what's something becomes nothing. And so another way of looking at it is I believe that everything came from nothing. That's another way of looking at it, without using like eons and Sophias and demiurges. Oh yeah, and the Yaldabaoth is like the demiurge. The demiurge is like the real devil. And so people that are practicing Orthodox religion, including Israel, like they are worshiping the demiurge, which calls for these blood sacrifices. Because if you read in the Old Testament, that guy wanted all sorts of blood sacrifices, and you got to worship that God. If you don't worship that God, your ass is grassed. Now, which is a problem with monotheism. And so monotheism, what they did was they cornered the market. They monopolized. Talk about monopoly. These guys did it. And so they became also atheists to the other gods. 99% of the other gods are all like, they don't exist. or they're just evil spirits, fallen angels. Like you got to read, the biblical account to understand what that is. And I don't want to get into it. Hopefully I'm talking to an audience who actually knows something. So, so like you have that, and we're caught up right in the middle of this because like you don't know what the beginning of the story is. We're born into this world and we're in the middle of it now, and then we hope to figure out the beginning by getting to the end. But anyways, Hunter S. Thompson. So like he's in this vortex, and so like near the end of the movie, he's like alone. The lawyer left, and he has to go back to Rolling Stone with his finish of his article, and like he's typing away, and the camera pulls out, and it looks like you're looking at looking at him through a tube or a corridor, but it's like a vertical and looking down. And he winds up like this little small thing, and then he's thrown into space and he's spinning around, and where he's talking that like at the end of the tunnel, he was fearing that I can't remember the quote that there is nothing at the end of the tunnel, there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and so that's like now the thing is, I would say, man, he should have read books on he should have become a Gnostic, but he was, I don't know, but probably because he was a Cancer, he was just a crazy guy, but he was a brilliant writer, brilliant, very, very smart. And I've read almost all his books by now. And so, but I couldn't help but like think that he went into the abyss. When he went to Las Vegas, he went into the abyss. And so the thing about that is that you're going into a type of hell. And so then the idea of Dante comes up. And so I'm going to reread the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas after I reread the Divine Comedy, and I would really want to pick apart the Divine Comedy because there's something about that I want to tie in with Gnosticism, because what Dante talks about is that the hell is basically exactly what you created for yourself, and that's why these individual people are in these rungs, different rungs, and they're experiencing just the perfect amount of retribution that they have to because of what they did. So they created that reality. And so you create reality. Now, an example of this would be if you go to Tolkien. And so Tolkien wrote a book, The Tree and Leaf by Nigel. It was actually a short story. And so this is a good example of this. So this guy is a painter. He loves nature. And he paints these beautiful, meticulous paintings. And he spent his whole life painting one fucking masterpiece. When he either dies or something happens to him, and he winds up in that world that he created. Well, guess what? Now, who are the shadows doing the shadow dance that made these people who are shackled in Plato's cave? Who's created this? It's us. And so we are like the niggle painting the forest, and we go in. Now we're in this. So we created this world ourselves, because really, ultimately, we're from a higher form or of something beyond space and time. And somehow we were sucked into ourselves and not like, outward trying to receive the monad. And so what happened is we got sucked into ourselves like Ziggy Stardust got sucked into his mind because of his ego. And that's the whole thing about the ego, folks. That's why a lot of mystical traditions, they want to somehow, address the ego as a problem and to get rid of it, because it's like a wall, and the ego is a wall between the subject and the object. And so the problem is you think you're separate from somebody else, and so that's why you want to steal and take from them, which is what we really want to do. I mean, we really, so like if you put people in a closed space and the food rations run out, and then you have like cutlery, equipment, and you have like all the sauces and spices and things, and you have like 100 people, and you can watch as many movies as you want. Guys can get off on all the porn they want. Women can have as many dildos they want, and they can also have sex with each other. Whatever it is that they can do whatever they want. They have access to a lot of things. But then the food runs dry. The food ends. The food's gone. But there's a garbage disposal. There's sinks. There's stoves and ovens. And there's all sorts of cutlery, and there's all sorts of spices, and there's menus and how to cook people, and it will taste, really good. Eventually, we're going to start eating each other. And I'm not going to get into the details. I know I'm right. And so, and then this history of cannibalism when people, they're playing, it crashes, and eventually they eat, the dead bodies. And to make it even more interesting, what if these people, like they could, like no one's dying anytime soon, and so now you're not eating for like months. You're gonna probably start killing people. I don't care what anybody says. I think that's what's gonna happen. That would happen. Okay. And so, and that's just an example. That's just pretty much a microcosm of the macrocosm of how this world works. Because that's what we do anyways. Everything's killing and eating each other. And the reason why this could probably be hell. And so the idea is you're supposed to get the heck out of here. Now, what's interesting is in the Tibetan Book of the Dead and also the Egyptian Book of the Dead, I tried reading them when I was like, 24 or something like that. I was in undergrad school. And the only thing I can remember is that you're supposed to go to the painful light like that. Like this is like very bright burning kind of a thing. And it burns away your past, He's like, oh, you can't, and it hurts. It definitely cooks up your ego. And so it separates past, present, and future. It separates, object and subject, and you got to go towards that. And it hurts. Like it just hurts. It's like if you fall in a body of water from like 5 stories high, you're gonna hurt your back. If you don't know how to dive, you're like, So it's like that. So instead, what feels good is what you're going to want to go to. So there's this other light that's much more soft. It's probably like the color of when you close your eyes and you see the color of your eyelid. And what's funny about that is that's when then you wind up like you're in utero, and then you wind up being born, and then you're back in here again. And so we've been doing this. Like I've been doing this for eternity, and you've been doing what you're doing for eternity because we haven't gotten out of here. That's kind of like a classical way of looking at it. And like Nietzsche came up with this idea about the eternal return. This is like a mental experiment that like you've lived your life like this for eternity. Like, devised by some demon, and he makes it like to where you can't, you don't know if that's what's happening, and you just can't get out of this. That's the eternal return. And anyways, so like all these things tie in. And so Hunter S. Thompson was like, a form of Socrates because he was able to look beyond, the surface of reality. And he did it in all places in Las Vegas, which is, it's like, that's the real heart of the United States, not Washington, not this, not that. It's like Las Vegas because that's what people really are about. And it represents what we are living for. That's the metaphor for what motivates us. And so he's in there taking LSD and having these transcendental type kind of like, experiences and stuff. And it's all a dream. And then when he finally gets out of that, it's just like, what the hell was that about, And so I just kind of like tied in with that. So that's why, I like him. And, I get ideas that compound, from that. And so then my whole video is about like how I'm entertaining the idea about Gnosticism. I call it Neo-gnostic. And probably I can edit here because then I can continue it in another video. Thank you for your attention on this matter.